Good everyone. I hope you guys have an amazing day. Welcome to another episode of ANZ podcast, Salesforce podcast. Today I have with me very special guest, Mark Tossell. Mark is a pretty special guy. He's I would say him superstar in Salesforce space. Because if you look at the Mark profile, over 420 badge. He's also honored to be a Tableau CRM ambassador. Fantastic. And he also worked for Salesforce as a partner solution engineer. Welcome to my show, Mark.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So obviously we're going to talk about your book. So you've launched a book, which is a pretty amazing book. That's Creating Actionable Insight Using Tableau CRM. But before I dive into that, I just wanted to ask you a very simple question. How did you start your Salesforce journey? How did it all begin in the first place?
Yeah, it's always interesting telling this story. So if I go back, I studied mechanical engineering at university, and I worked for Procter & Gamble as a project engineer.
Right.
I then left that career. I moved to the United States for 7 years and actually studied to be a church minister or a pastor.
Nice.
And I did that for, including the study time, it was about 20 years of my life.
Right.
And unfortunately had some health issues around mental health and depression. I had a pretty awful breakdown. That would be about 7 years ago now. It took 4 months off of work to recover and was unable to go back to being a minister or a pastor. So was actually unemployed in a pretty bad space of my life. I'm married, I have one son, and couldn't find work. So this was early 2016. Financially, it was very bad. And what happened was a friend of mine with a financial planning business wanted to implement Salesforce. And, it's quite expensive to get a consulting firm to do that for you when you're only a small business.
Yep.
And he asked me, he said, hey, we're looking at implementing Salesforce. It's a CRM. Would you be interested? And I said, yes, I would be. And I got off the phone and I Googled CRM and Salesforce because I had absolutely no idea what they were.
Right.
No IT background or training. I had done a little bit of work with Microsoft Access many years before. So it was pretty crazy, right? I mean, he hired me to build out financial services cloud. I literally had never touched Salesforce. So I was learning and building, obviously conducting the workshops. We built out Salesforce. We then built Pardot marketing automation,
right,
process automation. And then I got involved with Tableau CRM, which was then known as Einstein Analytics. And that was would have been about 5 years ago. And fell in love with Einstein Analytics, Einstein Discovery Machine Learning, which was brand new. And what we then did was I left that business as an employee. We started a new business, which was a Salesforce partnership. And I was there 4 years in charge of business development, pre-sales and sales. And then as of January this year, I moved, a big move, to Salesforce and Tableau, and I'm now a solutioneer at Tableau. So it's a pretty crazy journey.
Yeah, indeed it is, right? Thank you very much for sharing that. And, sorry to hear about your pre-Salesforce journey. I know it's, sometimes, life throws a curveball at you, right? I mean, but I'm glad. I mean, you did quite well. I mean, your journey to Salesforce is pretty inspiring, to be honest. I mean, I'm really inspired with your journey. And that's fantastic.
Glad to hear that.
Oh, you're welcome. Now coming to your book, right? I mean, obviously you published a book, which is a pretty amazing book. And so I do know that, right? Writing a book is a very difficult task because I'm writing one book, but not related to Salesforce, but as a sci-fi book. But what's your inspiration
Oh.
behind writing this book? Obviously, I know you have full-time job and family, so what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, look, very busy with a family and always constantly learning, related to my work, and then very busy at work. I would say that writing this book was probably one of the most challenging projects I've ever been involved in, from a number of perspectives. And, as I look back as to the why, I think that when you look at the Salesforce ecosystem, when you look at Tableau CRM and Einstein, it's an amazing tool. It's can be transformational if it's implemented and developed well. Unfortunately, there's a great shortage of people that are competent and then expert in Tableau CRM and Einstein. And I was approached by the publisher to consider writing the book.
Right.
And I felt like it would be a great way to give back to the community and also be a way to just really address the shortage that we have at the moment of qualified people in this particular area.
Right. That's good to know. So obviously, when you start writing, you have your own fun times as well as challenging times too. So would you like to share, which part of the book was the most fun to write?
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Sure. So look, the most fun part, I would say, was there's a chapter in there where I dive into a dashboard design, best practice with Tableau CRM, and I actually give a number of anonymized real-world examples with screenshots and sharing the various ways that Tableau CRM can be used, the various ways that it has impacted businesses and not-for-profit organizations. And for me to go back through a whole bunch really of old development environments where I built these, and in some cases built a fresh one so I could use it for the demo, and to think through the use case and the impact that the solution made. That was just, that was super fun. That was probably my most enjoyable part of the book, I would say.
All right, cool. Thank you very much for that. I think that part really going to help someone who's new to the Tableau as well, right? Because they can relate to the real life experience, and so that's cool. And what about the challenging part? Have you felt any part of the book do you feel was the most challenging to write?
Yeah, that's an easy question to answer.
Okay.
The reason being that I'm not a dev, I'm not a developer, and I don't particularly enjoy writing code. I learned JSON and SQL, as a Tableau CRM creator and administrator, but it's not something that's my favorite thing to do. It's not really my cup of tea. So for the book, I had a chapter around how to know when to code and when not to code, and talking about JSON and SQL. And the reason that was the most challenging was that it's actually quite a difficult subject to answer.
Right.
Because the platform's continually developing so that you can actually do more and more with clicks, not code. Like, you can do way more. You can build so much more in the platform now without JSON and SQL than you used to need, say, when I started 5 years ago. And in fact, one of my previous colleagues, when she began using Tableau M 7 years ago, I think it was 100% code. So that was quite challenging to dive into the detail of when you do and don't need code, and if you do, what kind of code do you need? And it was challenging, but honestly, it was very rewarding when I finished that.
Right. Just to give you context to the listeners, right? SQL, that's the Salesforce analytics query language, right?
Correct.
So can someone bypass SQL, or is that really important for someone to learn?
That's a very good question. Look, honestly, like I said, you can do more and more with the platform as it continues to develop. I could answer this and say, read my book because I do have a chapter on it, because it's all about the use cases. For example, there's something in Tableau CRM called a binding, like a selection binding or result binding, where you want to use a selection query or result query to drive behavior and link information in the dashboard. Well, it used to be, not so long ago, that the only way to do that was to use JSON. But now quite a lot of that can be done in the UI. The same is true for SQL. There's a lot of things that for example, you couldn't add a second data set to a query on a dashboard without using SQL, when now some of that can be done in the UI. You used to be able to build a time series prediction using SQL. Now you can do that in the UI. So look, I would suggest that there's a lot that you can build without JSON and SQL. But it's really comes back to two things. It comes back to the business use case.
Right.
And it comes back to the complexity of the data that you're trying to bring in. If you're trying to create a really complex metric, which has got various data sets, and you're unioning, if that's a word, you're using a union to join them, and then you're weighting some aspects of that calculation, and you've got various data streams in there and combining it together, you're going to have to bite the bullet and use SQL. I'd probably suggest that if you just want to be an Einstein admin and take data sets that have been built, build some dashboards, administrate the Tableau CRM site, most of that you can do with that code. But if you're going to be an Einstein developer or the initial implementer and creator, you eventually you're going to get to the point like I did where you have to learn them to some extent.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. That makes total sense. Right. You mentioned about the data sets, right? So obviously, in Einstein or Tableau, right? So we'll have an opportunity to deal with the large data sets. Have you seen any performance issues, especially with the large data sets from your experience?
Yeah, look, probably two areas to consider. Firstly, dashboards.
Yep.
So if the dashboard is built with best practice, the performance of Tableau CRM dashboards is actually very good.
Right.
However, if you don't follow best practice, so for example, if you've got a lot of complex data transformations and you're performing all of those in the SAC wheel on the dashboard, as opposed to building some of that into your data prep, then you're most likely going to face some performance issues. Now, when it comes to the actual data flows and the recipes, those can just take longer, depending upon the volume, the complexity, the makeup of the data, the transforms, the data connections. However, the way to get around that is scheduling. Everybody talks about real-time data. In my experience, 9 out of 10 businesses don't need real-time data. For many of them, data that's even an hour old, or in some cases a day old, is perfectly fine, depending what you're doing with it. So therefore, when it comes to those data flows and recipes running in the background, then, you can schedule those so that you can get around some of those performance issues. There are some extreme examples, but I know that the team is working constantly, to continue to improve the performance, and they've come a really long way.
Right. Okay. All right. That makes sense. Okay. Now, when it comes to customer, right? Obviously, customer, they're not very tech savvy sometimes, right? So when you go to customer and talk about data, does customer truly understand the value of data? I mean, from your experience, Like if you go.
Yeah, there's probably two questions really. I'll break that down into two questions.
Right. Okay.
So,
Cool.
number one, do they see the potential of data? Then I would say yes. Many businesses, many organizations, many individuals, they realize that there's a lot of value in data, that it can inform decision making, it can truly transform the way people live and work. And they know that because, in their personal lives, they've seen that. But the second question is not do they see the potential, do they realize the potential? Right. And I would say in many, many cases, they do not realize the potential. I actually presented, I think about 6 months ago, to the Australian Computer Society on that subject of, overcoming that hurdle of just not getting value out of data, of not having data insights that are utilized and adopted and impacting and informing smart decision making. And there's so many reasons why people don't realize the value of data. Sometimes it's the inability, honestly, to define what they want to get from the data, like what is the business value that they want to get, and agreeing on that internally and being aligned on that. Also, a big hurdle is the fact that for most organizations, their data is just incredibly disconnected and siloed. And, getting one truth, a source of truth in a data set or several, for want of a better term, certified data sets that have been tested and approved for company-wide use is extremely challenging. Right. But I think, one of the great challenges today is just a shortage of resources. So, unfortunately, due to COVID, many businesses and organizations have failed or at least faltered. But information technology and the data space, the exact opposite has happened because COVID-19 has acted as a catalyst for digital transformation. So now the challenge is that, you want to be able to either develop in-house or hire people that are literate both in business and technology and can join those two worlds together. That is extremely challenging to find people that can do that effectively. They don't just have the technical skills. They have the business acumen, the soft and communication skills to really grab the hand of business, grab the hand of technology and the IT team, join those together, make something amazing happen. Right. So in my opinion, that really is one of the great challenges. Technology itself can be a challenge. I don't think in this day and age that it has to be. I think often the challenges are more around business, people, and process.
Right. Okay. That makes total sense. Now, you do mention a bit of on the challenging aspect, right? I mean, say for instance, if someone wants to get into Einstein and Tableau CRM, right? Do they have to know machine learning? Is that a prerequisite, or someone say, let's say I don't have any idea about machine learning, just for the sake of argument. Can I learn Einstein? Can I be efficient at the same time? Or is that a prerequisite?
Well, I'm glad that it isn't a prerequisite, or else I never would have started using Einstein Discovery. So when you talk about Einstein and Tableau CRM, the really simple way to distinguish those is Einstein is the AI, right? Artificial intelligence, machine learning. Yep. TCRM, Tableau CRM, is the business intelligence or the business insights, data visualization and analytics. And as you look at Einstein as what we call a supervised machine learning platform. Right. I actually began using it, I'm going to guess 4.5 years ago, maybe. Right. Maybe 5, maybe 4.5. I didn't have the foggiest idea about machine learning. I didn't have a background in probability or statistics, but I think I saw the power, the potential that this tool had to automate the data discovery process, to create intelligent predictions based on historical patterns, And I began playing around with it. I began learning it. I was already building a lot in Tableau CRM on the BI side. And as I began using the AI tool, it was a lot less mature then than it is now. So I actually did take some online classes in machine learning and probability statistics so that I could understand what was going on, so that I could understand the metrics that are used to communicate whether or not a model is trustworthy or accurate, to use a term that I don't really like. Things like R squared and root mean squared error, and area under the curve, and logistic regression and linear regression and classification, and all those things that I find absolutely fascinating and have studied a lot since. But I think what's changed is if you go to use Einstein Discovery now, I think you could get great value of it without knowing it. You get great value out of it without knowing all of that.
Right.
And that's the beauty of the tool. It's not designed to replace data scientists. It's designed to complement them, to grab the low-hanging fruit that machine learning can harvest, and then free up your data science experts for the more complex work that only they can do.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? So it's like you don't have a prerequisite, but if you wanted to learn machine learning, you're most welcome to, right? So you can bring more value to it if you do understand machine learning, but it's not really required, right? It will take care of it anyways for you behind the scene.
Correct.
All right, fantastic.
Yeah, and again, the tool has evolved so much now that it's way more user-friendly is perhaps a term that I would use.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's good to know. So let's say I'm a Salesforce customer, right? I never used Tableau before. So do you have any kind of recommendation or suggestion that what should they do to, prepare for it, right? Because say, for instance, right, I mean, I wanted to get into, so I'm as a customer, we decided, okay, we got a lot of data, so we will love to, adopt Einstein and Tableau CRM. Anything you think should the customer pay attention to? Obviously, I do understand that they need to hire a resource, which is great, but apart from that, something that comes to your mind or challenges they might face during their journey?
Yeah, I'll try and give a short answer to a question that could probably take the whole call to answer. I think, in my opinion, the number one priority is to clearly identify the business use case and the desired outcomes and deliverables.
Right.
If all you're saying is, hey, we've got all this data about our sales, and we've been gathering this for years, and we really need to use this. We need to build some dashboards with this and, make use of it and visualize it and get this in the hands of our leaders and our sellers. But exactly what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to give them insight into whether or not they're likely to hit their targets? Do you want intelligent forecasting? Do you want to track cumulative progress to target over time? Do you want to be able to dive into your sales data by segment, by territory, by team as a leader and be able to identify areas of great performance and weak performance? Do you want to use the data to identify white space for cross-selling and upselling? I mean, there are so many different ways of using data, and those are just a handful of sales examples, right? So as a business, I think as a leadership team and involving people from every tier in the business, brainstorm and come together, put together like a wish list, as it were, and then in a really brutal, analytical fashion, take that list and pare it down to the bare essentials of these are the 3, 4, 5 things we really need our data analytics and insights and predictions to deliver. And we might have a wish list and a roadmap for the next 5 years. But, we're about to invest $250,000 in people and systems and consultants and technology and everything. At the end of that 12-month, $250,000 project, these are the outcomes that we need, and this is how we're going to measure them, because you can't manage what you don't measure. So you have to map, you have to measure, and you have to manage. And I would say that's more important than almost anything, except you did hit on something, which is the resourcing. You don't want to dive into one of these projects, ideally without someone in-house, depending on the size of your business, that can lead it, or if not, a great technology partner who'll partner with you for the long term for success.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. That makes total sense. Right. So, so coming to Australian market, right? Have you noticed a growing demand for Einstein in the Australian market? Because in New Zealand, right, it's kind of slowly catching up, right? A couple of years ago, when I used to work on the Einstein, right, platform, I did for Australian customer because we got none in New Zealand space at that time. So is it catching up in the Australian market, or because obviously there are other tools, right? Power BI and other analytic tools. So so what's your opinion on Einstein in terms of the customer demand or Australian market demand point of view? Have you seen any growing trend, or is it consistent? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. So yes, in my previous role in a partner business, definitely saw an increase in demand for Tableau CRM and Einstein, particularly for TCRM the last probably 24 months. For Einstein AI, I'd suggest the last 12 months,
right,
where people are no longer just playing with it, building a proof of concept, experimenting. They're actually building, testing, deploying to the production where people are using it in their business as usual, their day-to-day work. I am careful, though, to distinguish between Tableau CRM, which is actionable insights in Salesforce,
right,
compared to Tableau, which is your analytics everywhere for everyone from any data, for want of a better way of putting it, right? So as far as competing out there against various competitors who I won't name, I think that I know that Tableau competes extremely effectively and is a market leader. Tableau CRM again is a niche product. It's positioned. It doesn't have to just draw on Salesforce data, but it is designed and intended to be embedded in Salesforce to give you those contextual, actionable insights. Whereas Tableau, for example, competing against competitors, it's got the complete analytics experience powered by its proprietary language called VizQL. Right. It's got that deploy anywhere platform flexibility. It's an enterprise platform, end to end from data prep all the way through visualization, consumption, etc. And it also incorporates the predictive and the AI side of things. Right. That's good. I kind of answered two questions in one there.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Thank you very much for that. Well, we pretty much reached the end of our podcast. Yeah, so that's fantastic. So if someone wants to buy a book, right? So do you recommend going to Amazon.com? Is that the place where they can buy? Or
yeah, there's two places they can buy. They can go to Amazon, or they can go to the publisher, which is PACKT. Just Google PACKT.
Right.
They're a publisher that's based in India. As far as hard copies, like printed copies of the book, to my knowledge, I think it's available in England, the US, and Australia.
Right.
It's not available in every country as a hard copy, and then it's available as a Kindle ebook, obviously anywhere. It's been really fun to be on the podcast. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. You have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.